I want to thank this panel and the moderator. Again, critical information for us to contemplate and lets us know all the important decisions we're going to have to make. If I could ask our last panel of the day to come forward and our moderator. As they're coming forward, this is a panel on full-scale operations. We're talking about shared law enforcement, investigations, compliance issues here. As being a former law enforcement official, this one is important to me, as it is to all of us, though. And we brought in some experts from Pennsylvania and New Jersey, again, to talk to us about these issues. But in dealing with the Commonwealth here, I have to tell you, I am very impressed with the level of commitment to this issue. The Colonel of the State Police and key staff members are here today. Jen Stark from the Attorney General's Office, who is the Gaming Counsel, has been here all day long. The Undersecretary for Public Safety is here, paying attention to these issues. Chief Mahoney from Alcohol Beverage Control Commission and some of the staff members are here. So everyone is taking this responsibility seriously, and I just think that this is an area where we will get it right. We are honored to have Sheriff Cabral moderate for us today. The first woman sheriff in the Commonwealth. Very proud of that, Sheriff. Former district attorney, former assistant attorney general, lots of experience on the legal side, and now working in corrections and all the responsibilities the sheriff has. But in speaking with the sheriff, she has a great concern for these shared responsibilities. How do we do this and do it well, and everyone cooperate and share information? So I'm going to let the sheriff introduce the panel, and looking forward to this one.
Good afternoon. I know you ate about an hour ago, so we'll try to keep this lively. I know it happens the hour after lunch. And because we only have an hour, we're going to focus this panel on things we need to know right now. How do we best prepare, and what do we need to put in place to get the kind of law enforcement infrastructure that we want for gaming in Massachusetts? And we do have a terrific panel of very experienced professionals. They're going to help us do that. Jerry Stoll is the Director of Compliance for the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. Thank you for coming. Rick Lindsay is a former New Jersey State Police Casino Gaming Bureau Chief. Now with the former, I couldn't tell which was the former. Was the former the state trooper part or the Bureau Chief part? Or both? Both, okay. And Bob Carroll is Chief of Compliance for the Foxwoods Gaming Resort. Thank you for being here. I think everybody's got everyone's bio, so we're going to just jump right in. And though I will likely direct a specific question to a specific panelist, I really do want you all to jump in and have this be interactive. And I'm going to start with Jerry. Can you give the audience an idea of the universe of law enforcement that we're talking about here that has to be involved with gaming? I think we have a sense of many different agencies, regulatory and otherwise, having to be involved, but who exactly are we talking about?
Well, the universe, first decision that you will have to make as a commission is who has the primary responsibility for casino crimes. Once that decision has been made, your second decision will be as to who is responsible for the area surrounding the casino. As your day develops, you have to incorporate some federal agencies for Title 31 compliance. There's going to be issues, intelligence sharing issues. There will be information issues that are extremely important, because you're going to find that the nexus of a lot of your issues will originate in the casinos. We must all pay attention, and with the technology as it is today, everything is interrelated. So, what occurs in the casino will have a relationship to the local jurisdiction, to the state, and ultimately, at some point in your future, to the federal level. Communication is key. All agencies have to cooperate, and I would suggest that when you get together, leave your egos at the door and get down to business. The turf battles just delay the inevitable because you must communicate, you must cooperate, or, you're going to really be, be in a position that's unenviable. Give me some help.
Well, I was gonna, picking up on what you said, are the rules of the road really clear? This is for Rick, between regulatory agencies and statutory criminal law compliance, or is there some overlap and flexibility? Is that where the cooperation comes in?
Well, there's some overlap and flexibility, but they are clear, and they are clearly delineated. Regarding the universe, as Jerry was saying, the universe of crimes affecting the casino industry, if you think about the casino industry, the patrons come from lots of places. They come from, it's not your local patrons typically. You're going to try and attract customers and businesses from outside the jurisdiction, outside the state, outside the country. And that's why the law enforcement perspective is so important, and having those relationships and building those relationships is so important because it's a force multiplier for intelligence, for investigation, and for basically having a good operation and an effective operation. You want to have all those players involved.
Bob, who do you have in terms of law enforcement? What agencies are participating and cooperating at Foxwoods?
Done at several different locations. At Foxwoods, all of the federal agencies and the state agencies, the state police has an on-site presence. There's a tribal police component. There's memorandums of understanding, and there's a compact process that sets out the relationship specifically. That's a Native American situation, which would be different. But the same process of memorandums of understanding is critical to establishing the relationships. One of the advantages that you have in the existing statute is it sets forth a lot of those relationships already. It provides for roles, and it allows future flexibility and discussions in how those roles are going to be defined. But they are absolutely essential to have those relationships set up before the doors actually open. And they are very doable. It's not even a question of egos anymore as much as it is just practical, good law enforcement cooperation. And I think that the systems that have been pretty well developed and matured now are very effective. And many of those examples, I'm sure, will be examined by the commission, and it will choose the best possible combination for the Commonwealth.
And so for each of you, how did you go about getting all of the players at the table and setting, where does that leadership come from to do all of that, where law enforcement is concerned, and how did you go about getting everybody in the same room and figuring it out?
Well, in New Jersey, the leadership came out of necessity. Actually, as a industry matures, there's always measures that will eliminate costs, and the state police contingent in the casinos had diminished over time. We were forced to engage with the county, the city, and the feds in a task force environment to combat a lot of the issues that were, instant at that period of time. In Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania State Police has the law enforcement responsibility in the casinos, and they've entered into MOUs with the local policing authority when it's other than the state police. And they've done a pretty significant job in addressing the crimes in Pennsylvania casinos. Now, as a footnote, the crimes have been minimal in the casino, much less than was thought to have occurred. But it's been a positive experience so far.
And also, like in Atlantic City, for instance, it's been a good experience and it's been a bad experience, and it changes. It's dynamic and it changes over time, and it's really an evolutionary process, affected by the economy, restructuring, leadership, political influences, emphasis on, from the business standpoint. But those relationships are really important, and keeping them intact, I think, is and moving forward. The leadership that before I left the Casino Gaming Bureau, the driving force behind that was intelligence. And the driving force behind that was Homeland Security. So when I worked for, actually, Colonel Cameron in Division, I was a chair of an intelligence-led policing work group. And so when I returned to Atlantic City, it really gave me the opportunity to have a microcosm there of what the state police, or an example for the state police, and what we could do. And it was a really fertile ground, and brought in Atlantic City Police Department, brought in the county and the local departments. And although this was done before, it was a little bit different because now they had chips in the game. They wanted the intelligence. They wanted to share the intelligence. And that was a really helpful aspect to get everybody on the same team.
My experience is simply to work up what are the basic criteria that are required in the statute, perhaps even create a template for a memorandum of understanding that can be used and circulated among agencies. You do have pre-existing relationships that have to be addressed. The areas, I think, in my experience, that we've experienced issues in are primary and secondary criminal jurisdiction. Some of that's established by statute already here, but a relationship is worked out so that, for example, you may have a statute, or you may have a regulation, or you may have an MOU, which would state that the state police, for example, have primary criminal jurisdiction, if not exclusive jurisdiction, within the casino. That also would require, obviously, staffing and having a trooper available for response of a criminal event that may happen at any time of day for a 24-hour cycle. Most of the facilities that we've been involved with in jurisdictions also have first responder arrangements, where the MOU doesn't, it establishes what the jurisdiction is, but if somebody's being stabbed on a casino floor, you need a law enforcement presence immediately, okay? And generally speaking, the locals, the local police departments that have response, whether it's a sheriff or a local department of a host community, or on occasion, if there is a trooper available, whatever it may be, there may be an immediate response to deal with a specific situation. That doesn't change the jurisdictional allocations, but there is a reality check that you have to have. And that it translates down through the chain, because the practical things that law enforcement officers face are, I'm called to make an arrest. Do I have authority here? Yes or no? I've made an arrest. Now where do I bring the prisoner? Okay? Where do I file my complaint? Who's going to prosecute? Right. Is it going to be a state attorney general, assistant attorney general, or is it going to be a DA? Some of these, again, are addressed in the statute, and I think quite well, so that's been laid out. But there's still a lot of areas that are going to have to be filled in by the commission in the form of regulations to make the system work. And it will have some growing pains. I mean, that's just a natural occurrence. But again, I believe that already there's a strong basis to move forward.
Do you find the task force model to be best, or one of the best practices, versus individual memoranda of understanding or agreement, but no cohesive center group?
Yeah. Well, again, you have to distinguish the different roles. I mean, regulatory obviously is the commissions, okay? When you get down into criminal, you have to distinguish a criminal charging circumstance and, say, a criminal intelligence sharing. There may be a situation where you have an arrangement in a task force concept where information is shared with the local host community and vice versa, at a state level and with federal agencies. And that information exchange is something completely separate from who can arrest and when and where. So all of those are addressed either in the legislation or in an MOU or in policies or regulations of the commission. But to get back to your initial question, a lot of this is established. Basic parameters are set for an MOU, and then a lot of good meetings have to occur with people going in with open minds. And out of that will come a thorough and efficient memorandum of understanding that's workable.
Jerry, you mentioned crime. I want to get into specifically the kinds of incidents that law enforcement could expect to encounter, but let's talk first about whether or not there's a difference between the perception and the reality of the amount of crime. I think there's some anticipation or some perception that crime spikes when you have a casino. can you tell, I want each of you to address it, but starting first with Jerry, can you tell us if that has happened in your experience, and if it has, specifically where?
Well, let me answer that in a couple phases. My experience in New Jersey was that of whatever happens in the real world will happen in the casino. Homicides, rapes, robberies, shootings, etc., but at much, lesser frequency. In Pennsylvania, since I've been up there almost 7 years, and since the casinos have opened, there's been zero, if any, increase in crime, and one event that I would even say would hit the radar in the level of significance. It's been a pleasant surprise.
Well, and I'll come back to you, but I want to hear your experience and also why you think you've had the experience you've had.
You mentioned rapes and everything, and you have no significant crime. I don't know. The
In New Jersey.
in New Jersey, okay. It's true. I mean, it's basically a small city. A casino complex is essentially a small city, and crime. If there's going to be an increase, and statistically there probably is, but it's going to be proportional because you're bringing in more people, you're bringing in more commerce, you're bringing in more businesses, and you're also going to bring in probably more of the negative element as well. So, it's like Willie Sutton said, why do you rob banks? It's where the money is. Well, maybe that's it. It's because it's an opportunity. But also with casinos, you have enhanced security. You have a vastly increased law enforcement and a knowledgeable law enforcement presence, because as it evolves, they really understand the business. They understand the trends in the business, and it's really important. And so you have that. You have an enhanced, typically, property that's designed for security, with that taken into account. That's actually part of the physical design of the casino complexes, including CCTV. I know in Atlantic City, and it was unique in New Jersey initially, and with technology, it's changed quite a bit, but there was CCTV coverage or video of almost every crime that we had. So our evidence room in Atlantic City, as opposed to if you went to another jurisdiction, we had video for everything that happened. So for a prosecutor, I think it's very, very helpful. For prosecuting cases, it's very helpful, but also to persuade people maybe not to come to a casino to commit a crime. That's very powerful.
I would say short answer, no. In my experience, and I would include in that as a prosecutor, where we supervise the corruption unit in New Jersey, that the mere presence of casinos was not in and of itself in any way accelerated additional crimes. I would point this out, though. With regard to casinos as a facility itself, the visual surveillances that are capable, responsive management, clear policies, good relationship, between the regulatory agency and the casino management in terms of reporting in a timely fashion, all act as deterrents. Another area I think might be relevant to you. Over the years, we've had the opportunity, when I was doing organized crime cases, to sit down with significant leaders of organized crime, heads of families, particularly in the New York, New Jersey area. And we specifically questioned them at the time about casinos. And it's legendary in the Philadelphia area about the Scarfo family and all the power and control and mayoral corruption and things of this sort. What really surprised us, and this information is not really that dated to the extent that this is probably from the mid-'90s, early '90s, that was particularly relevant. Those bosses all said that they felt that the casinos were dead to them. They did not feel that they could risk the exposure. They, of course, would concentrate on the ancillary businesses and try to get in under the radar. That wasn't working. And they credited a very, very aggressive vendor compliance function. They credited strict regulations, reporting and licensing, things of this sort, because the one thing organized criminal elements hate is exposure. And that is a critical factor that the casinos happen to do pretty well in terms of their ability to document who's on property, what they're there for, who they're meeting with. Add to that the extensive amount of access that a commission has to paperwork. All of that is a major deterrent. It's not, I wouldn't want to sit here in any way say it's completely given up, because obviously crime will go where crime can be successful. But I can tell you firsthand, in speaking to these people who controlled significant organized crime families, that they had real difficulty in penetrating the regulatory systems of casinos. And those systems have only improved. The ability now to get, through, digital access and so forth, even more detailed records, the tremendously improved visual surveillance capabilities in casinos, only acted at this point, I think, to make it even more difficult. So I'm very positive on it, I believe, from a criminal point of view.
Sheriff, could I interrupt and just ask you to expand the venue part of that question? In other words, you've spoken mostly to the issue of the facility in itself and the parking lots around it, and what you're saying kind of makes sense, that that's really an environment that's not really great for many kinds of crime. But what about the rest, the broader community? People are concerned about what the consequences are going to be in the rest of the host community and the other abutting communities, other surrounding communities. Is there any generalizations you can make about what happens in those regions as well?
Yeah, for the most part, what you can experience there is increased traffic, increased, the potential of, person-on-person crime. If, someone leaving a casino, and if, security is lax enough where they don't, view the entire picture, someone could be followed and accosted for their winnings or something like that. But, I believe that it's incumbent upon the casino and the locale to set up the safe perimeters and things like that, you want to have an environment where the patron is secure, that they are safe. And because if the patron believes they're not safe, they're not going to come back to your facility. So you have to, you have to look at the whole picture, but really focus on your perimeters on the casino. You keep out the unsavory element, and you pay attention. You have dress codes, you do different things within your power to assure that the clientele that you want in the casino is a clientele that supports your facility.
And Rick, as you speak to this question, can you also talk in terms of what about the residents and the property owners who may not necessarily be patrons of the casino, but feel as though perhaps their property or their safety is at risk by people leaving the casino or hanging around the casino, who need money to go to the casino or need something else? Can you include that in your response to Steve's question?
Sure. Like Jerry said, it's good security, adequate security, and good customer service, which kind of keeps people at the door, confronts people when they come in, make sure people, I guess, behave properly while they're there. But also in Atlantic City, they kind of rethought their position, which is pretty evident now. I think if you look at the media and the newspapers, prior to my leaving, the Governor Christie had requested that we re-examine the casino district in Atlantic City to focus on the casino district itself. So essentially that the casinos would not be islands onto themselves and interact more with the community. Speaking to intelligence, that was part of the plan. So along with the Atlantic City Police Department, we looked at how to better police, how to better address issues in those neighborhoods, about displacement. Okay, so if there's criminal activity, because it is an urban environment, and as if crime is going to be displaced, where's it going to go? When it goes to those places, what's going to happen? So we actually, as part of the intelligence program that we created, it was inclusive of our surrounding police chiefs, our surrounding communities. So they had a total awareness, and they have a stake and they have a buy-in. So and they have a voice, which I think is important.
Yeah, some of the most effective cases you make come from the surrounding community because of the cooperation with local law enforcement. But interestingly enough, you also have a lot of your casino employees who will live locally. And they too don't want necessarily crime in their neighborhoods. So you're more apt to get more cooperation on a citizen level than you would in say, just a factory or an industrial type concept. The other aspect of it is there is more opportunity to be able to report crime at different levels. The true conspiratorial, deeply rooted crime, the deep corruption and so forth that you get, again, is addressed with strong and aggressive regulations, and that acts as a very strong deterrent. One-on-one crime, you know, the junkie that's waiting to mug somebody can happen at a bus stop, it can happen anywhere. But again, those same people know that if they do it anywhere near the casino, there's a likelihood they're going to be seen. Plus, you also have a confluence of law enforcement because of these very same agreements. You have your locals, and you have your on-site state police, and you have agents and so forth in the area. So it's just not a attractive venue, if you will, per se, you know, for something that if you want to go and commit a series of crimes. Sure, you may take a shot, but you're going to get caught.
Did that address your question, Steve? Now, with all that we've been talking about, is there any distinction between when a casino is sited in an urban area versus a suburban area in terms of any of the answers that you've given about crime? Have you noticed a difference?
Well, Atlantic City is unique because Atlantic City has boardwalk casinos, which have a lot of foot traffic, and people travel from casino to casino, and a little bit like Las Vegas. And then they also have 3 casinos that sit on the bay. And there was always a marked difference in crime in the casinos that were off the boardwalk because you need a car to get there. And it was simple as that. Because you needed a method of conveyance to get there, it was a barrier, it was an insulator, and I think for the lower level type criminal activity. In Atlantic City, that's our experience, and you have different jurisdictions completely.
You know, we have 2 urban casinos in Pennsylvania, one in Pittsburgh, one in Philadelphia, and really the incidents of crime in those 2 casinos have been negligible. You know, the clientele is different. You know, without excuse, but they seem to be they're there for entertainment. You know, there's a lot of areas in the Pittsburgh casino that are available for non-gaming amenities. So there's bars, there's restaurants, there's buffets and different things that family people can go for an evening out. You know, the Sugar House Casino is on Delaware Avenue, which is, near the, the sports stadiums and many clubs on the same road. But, their experience has been relatively benign when it comes to crime since we opened. And I think it has, something to do. They've incorporated Philadelphia Police as a partner in their parking areas. The state police contingent there is very aware, and the security and surveillance keep notice on exactly what is going on within the casino. So that multi-layered approach at security and surveillance of the employees, the patrons, and the revenue, it seems to be working well.
Even with the boardwalk casinos in Atlantic City, it was always very noticeable the casinos themselves who were more vigilant. The casinos themselves, and by vigilant, I don't mean by that they had over-aggressive security. I mean they had better customer service. They had more attention, I think, to their customers, and that seemed to be a less inviting environment for criminal activity. So I don't think it's necessarily the urban aspect of it. I think it's a business aspect.
I agree. I mean, I just, I agree. I don't think there is an appreciable difference. Size of the casino sometimes can make a difference in terms of number of employees and things like that, and number of incidents you may have as a total. But no, I don't think simply setting a casino in an urban environment necessarily triggers off that, from a crime point of view, any difference.
And so, Bob, staying with you, we talked about organized crime just a second ago. Can you talk a little bit about how we make it incumbent upon the casino, essentially, to be the first line of defense in terms of, my perception is that one of the ways organized crime gets in is through third-party associates with vendors and so forth. How do you make sure that the casino, I don't know if it's through the RFP process or some other way, make sure that the casino is the first line of defense and then make those vendors responsible and accountable for reporting and so forth?
I'd say there are different criteria. One is that obviously you need responsive and effective management. you need a set of clear policies that would apply to any criminal event that may happen in any way, shape, or form, and the ability to report and document that and transmit that to the appropriate authorities. Effective surveillance, which is really part of the regulations, which will be requirements that the commission will have as to what degree and type and scope of visual surveillance there will be. That will certainly play a role. Also, additional items such as the ability to handle patron complaints and responses, that can be effective from a frontline point of view. And then you get to the whole process apart from just, say, patron-type crime. Internally, you have a internal audit process, as I mentioned before. You have a compliance department. You have an external audit group that usually comes in and does an annual audit. These are all mechanisms that are built into the system. The overall interest of the casino owner himself not to be defrauded and not to be beat by employees or corruption comes into play also. The fact that the state is getting a portion of those revenues, the state benefits from that vigilance too, because all of those numbers have to be documented and verified, and if there's any monkey business going on, it's likely to be picked up by any one of those oversight groups before you even get to the regulatory level and its own financial oversight mechanisms. So again, the industry has evolved and has matured to the point where there are a lot of very effective systems. The commission will make the final choices, what combination of those effective systems will be put in play.
The working together with casino security, casino surveillance, casino departments, and I noticed I left the casino. I spent about 17 years in a casino gaming bureau and 6 years in a casino environment prior to my enlistment in the state police. So I've been around the casino industry quite a while. And it was important, and I think Jerry can attest to this as well. You actually become a part of that community if you're going to be any good. You really have to know what's going on. You have to know the players. You have to know how everything works from a law enforcement perspective to be effective, and where the money flow is, how the money flows. And then you also develop relationships with people to where you can walk into a casino cage and know what the process is. And what the procedures are. Having strong sets of procedures, just as on dealers' games from cheating, and I have a background for investigating specifically casino cheating crimes, the procedures are so important because if that shows when people deviate from those procedures and they step out of line, it's the signal. But having that combination of casino security, surveillance, good relationships where you're going to have that flow of information, with casino management personnel, with the regulatory people in the casinos is really important. And those are your flags and those are your pointers, and they provide you intelligence, they provide you direction, and essentially going to be an indicator when something's at hand.
Do you want to add anything, Jerry?
Yeah, actually, the casino environment is, quite different from your normal, city environment. But there are norms. There are things that you should expect to see every day. There are things that should really raise the flag when you don't see them or when you see a deviation. In the old Atlantic City environment where there was coin, you could just walk across the floor and you'd hear the slugs hitting the tray. Just what you hear, and then you gravitate towards the sound, and there'd be somebody there putting lead coins in the slot machines, taking advantage. In the casinos of today, there are indicators, whether, the way a dealer handles the cards, the way, the deviation from acceptable behavior with your cards. After time, they stick out like sore thumbs. When you see somebody being lazy, somebody, showing a hold card to the player on the other side, just things will become second nature in time. But it's an exciting environment, and you have to pay attention. And I think that success is in your future. I think you're taking the right course of action, and I can't wait till you are up and running.
Do people in the audience have questions? No questions on law enforcement and criminal activity? See, everybody watches CSI and Law and Order.
We've asked, because we had such a long
Oh,
panel,
okay.
we've asked them to tweet their questions
Oh,
as
okay.
opposed to live questions.
Oh, everybody's tweeting them. I didn't realize that. Okay. Okay, so Steve is the only live question person.
Except for the,
All right, you get,
I actually-
membership has its privileges.
actually didn't think that maybe that either I heard your question quite right or they did, but you were asking about how does the casino act as the first line of defense against third-party vehicles for organized crime elements to get in? And you didn't really speak to that. But I too, like Sheriff Cabral, understand that if there is going to be an attempt to to penetrate these facilities by organized crime, it's likely to be through other providers, the laundry providers, et cetera. So how does that operate?
I believe those on a third party who would try to infiltrate would actually be identified by your background investigations and by the regulatory authority, and with the investigation that is completed there, because chances are these folks are not their first time dealing with you. They've been organized crime for a period of time, and they've created a track record, and you just, hopefully you have to get past the intelligence information into the information that you can substantiate and use that to adversely affect their licensing decision.
And that assumes that the vendor has it is incumbent upon the vendor. You make sure the vendor knows they have to report any changes with the people with whom they deal, because that's what's not readily apparent, is the subcontractor, the subcontractor.
And the regulatory process, I think, really improved to the point where, I think early on, in my perspective, a lot of that information came through our intelligence, through our organized crime bureaus, and was very helpful to us. That became less and less of a player. Intelligence still played a major role, especially through other agencies. They would be filter us information that would, I guess, have us target certain individuals or certain businesses that this is something we absolutely have to pay attention to. There may be some involvement, but the regulatory process, I think, was so good at keeping those type of people out, or identifying those type of situations, that they brought those to our attention, and I think that was a major effective element, especially in recent years.
Chairman, I would just add to that, compliance, aggressive compliance with regulations is a deterrent to organized crime infiltration. Again, I go back to management itself. It has such responsibility for reporting and the systems that are in place now. And we haven't even addressed things such as slot information systems that vendors have, where slot machines and so forth is electronic monitoring of machines, so that if there's anything that goes a little screwy with a machine, it's immediately detected by the casino, and then steps are taken. Patrons will complain all the time. Machines are tight or this and that. Those are normal. They're not criminal events. But when a cheat comes in, a professional cheat, intelligence sharing will sometimes detect that. If it's an organized crime type thing, the days are long gone where they can come in and go into a count room and skim a briefcase of money and walk out for so many different reasons. But I would think that even the electronic age that has now invaded casinos is very effective at watching every nickel and dime that's earned.
And for the cheating aspect, yeah, I think we were really effective at addressing cheating in Atlantic City, especially slot cheating, prior to becoming completely cashless. There were more ways to attack the machine, and more opportunities. But even casino cheating as well, having a robust law enforcement presence, having a true investigative, not just a responsive law enforcement presence is paramount. It allowed us to develop an expertise, and that's something that I think was detrimental prior to my leaving, that the nature of the organization that I belong to, in order to promote people, they had to pull people out of their expertise. And so if you develop years of an expertise, and you go to school, a slot school, and you have this background and you have this pedigree, and then they pull you out and they bring someone else in who doesn't have that. My experience is when you're dealing with those type of criminals, it's a dirty secret. And when you start speaking to them about it, you want to interview somebody, and you have some knowledge, that opens the doors and they share. And we were very successful in those type of crimes, developing informants, especially for table games cheats. And when you can expose that type of cheating and you can prosecute that type of cheating very effectively, it's a deterrent to anybody to try and cheat like that. And I know you're in close proximity to MIT and you're going to introduce blackjack. So, but
There'll be a ban on all MIT students and alumni.
Could I ask a question about coming back to the third-party problems? Is the incentive for organized crime to infiltrate the linen suppliers or the trash collectors or the food service vendors any greater for casinos than it is for a large hotel or a destination resort, and if so, why?
I can answer that. I would say no.
I would say no.
Any chance that, organized crime would have to infiltrate any major business, I would say no. There's no, the fact that a casino is a casino in and of itself is not more of an attraction. Just that, let's say, for example, in the 80s when there was a blossoming of new casinos in New Jersey, that happened to be the hot industry. That's where the people were going. That's where the businesses had to service. So no, the mere fact it's a casino. But again, actually the opposite would be true, because the more they got involved with casinos, they realized there's too many ways to get caught here.
And it's also one of the places where it's rare that you're going to find a place that is that essentially has the involvement of both state and federal and local law enforcement. It may be the one place maybe not your first choice. I won't say it's the last place you go, but it won't be your first choice, I would imagine.
Where there's a will, there's a way. Now, in Atlantic City, what we would find is that, dealers or employees with maybe a drug issue would, purchase their narcotics from somebody with some organized crime ties. And then the next thing you would see is they were betting heavily, going down into significant debt from betting. And what they would do is they would pay off their bets on the craps game. The bookie would come in and the dealer would throw the game to the bookie to pay off his debts. What the organized crime attempts to do is to capitalize on the fallibility and the issues that a lot of people experience, whether it be narcotic addiction or pain pills or illegal gambling, and take advantage of it for their own use. And that's where the scrutiny from the regulators is extremely necessary.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
I'd be interested from the compulsive gambling. You see it from a slightly different perspective, but what's your sense of how well, there's an art to this conversation that I don't know yet. Frankhoff talked about pathological gambling, which is probably the extreme end of the spectrum. And I understand that there's there's a problem gambling, which isn't, it's like problem drinkers as opposed to full-blown alcoholics. And I'm not quite sure what we're talking about there, but what, just as observers of the floor a lot, and as observers of what goes on in the facilities, to what extent are these operations actually capable of keeping away people whom we would generally consider shouldn't be there, who are there for reasons which are unhealthy and we would generally consider unacceptable?
Well, believe it or not, I believe they're specifically able to identify somebody that has, been at a particular location outside of the normal. 4 to 6 hours is a normal time period where a individual comes and plays slot machines. And this day shift personnel has seen this particular person here today and gone home, and then the next day sees the same person on the same machine. Now, believe it or not, the casinos are just like little cities that everybody is familiar. There are no secrets in casinos, and everything is noticed. There's training that the casino employees undergo to identify problem gamers, problem drinkers, and, just really, to really afford, those individuals some options. We in Pennsylvania have, a list of, treatment facilities, and, that if we see somebody that has the potential of being a compulsive or problem gaming addict, we will try to, afford them the opportunity to get some help. And the casinos are very, very aware, and they participate in that as well, because it does benefit them and the patron and the Commonwealth. There's, in my opinion.
Excess is a human condition. It's a detrimental one, but whether it's alcohol or narcotics or cigarettes or video games or gambling, that's what it is. And I think, I know in Atlantic City, the self-exclusion list and the process is, it's a pretty easy and open process, and I think it's been pretty successful. And, we've had very few issues and a lot of, I think, people benefited because of it.
Again, I don't have too much to add to that. I think problem gaming, to a certain degree, there's an analogy that can be made to a casino's responsibility to spot someone drunk from an alcoholic point of view, and has a responsibility, to either cut the person off or assist that person perhaps in getting home. If it's a problem gaming situation, particularly if there's credit involved and so forth, there are ways of monitoring it. And I do think there's a moral responsibility of casinos that comes into play there also. And part of what you could evaluate going forward in terms of your operators and your applications, what is the record of the applicant in dealing with those type of issues? Do they have a demonstrable record of treating those situations aggressively? And it's just one of the criteria you can add to your shopping list of evaluative criteria.
Let me ask you about that. What kinds of things would you add, would you require a casino to do? Can you require them to have a set-aside fund that actually contributes to treatment for addiction? Or what kinds of things have you seen that help you better weigh one applicant from another with regard to that in particular?
There's statutory distributions and so forth that are for, to address specific issues. Casinos or companies, not necessarily casinos, but companies will have their own programs that they can offer, whether it's an educational program or some sort of assistance. I would say every casino now, every company has an employee assistance program. That, by the way, is probably a bigger problem than a public problem gaming. Employees themselves getting involved in problem gaming situations, because then you have a potential compromise. And that's an area that is being, really addressed at this point in terms of employees getting themselves over their heads, particularly where they can gamble. So I think that there is adequate funding out there. The problem is not eradicated, probably never will be, but there are sources available.
Anything you want to add?
No, ma'am.
Can I ask another question? Despite the hopefully accurate but rosy picture you're portraying about the reality of crime, the perception and the fear is one that arises in many communities. Do you know of any strategies that have been effective in helping people understand the statistical information that you've given us here today, and your experiential information that paints a rather sanguine picture about the reality, to help reassure people, or at least let them have access to facts from which they can draw their own conclusions about the reality that you've painted here for us today?
I think that's a very astute observation, Commissioner, because there is that perception out there. And I think what's happening right here hopefully would be helpful to some. It is a process of education. The statistics will be what they'll be, going down the road. But I think the industry record right now has improved dramatically in the last 2 decades. Companies have come to realize that they have to pay attention to these type of issues involving problem gaming and alcoholism and employee misconduct and so forth. And I think that to reassure the public, I think you just have to educate the public, and it's going to take actual operational statistics from the Commonwealth to show that, there isn't this spike in crime, or these resources that have been dedicated to this are effective, and here's why. I think it's only a matter of developing the record, because right now you're starting with just public perception, public concern. All we can say is that in our experience now, and I think collectively we probably have, many decades, is the boogeyman fear of organized crime in the casino industry today is greatly exaggerated. And, for my personal benefit, I know that we spend a fair amount of time with major league criminals, and particularly, the traditional La Cosa Nostra types, and discuss with them what they didn't like and what they found to be problematic in convincing people to go bad and to become involved in crimes. And we came away with a different viewpoint. We thought, like most, that's where the money is, they'll find a way to get to it. But after you started looking at the statistics, you started listening to what they were saying, it bore out differently. It came out instead that the deterrent factors that were being set up systemically in the industry were working. And I think as Frank Fahrenkopf spoke today, the casino industry today is not the casino industry of prior years. And I think we're all kind of proud of that. And frankly, there's been an influx of, real quality business methodology into the whole thing. The publicly traded companies, all of the different oversight that exists at different levels has changed everything. And I think we just got to educate the public, and I think answer their questions as they come up, and let's hope the stats bear out what we're saying.
But to the Commissioner's question, that's it. Even though you can sort of point to statistics and point to data, how do you get the reality to penetrate the perception as a startup? Because everything that we're talking about today is how do we put our best foot forward, and a big part of that is educating the public. And so I'm wondering if there have been prior efforts, and anyone can answer this, of prior educational efforts beyond the town hall meetings that happen or community forums that happen around the issue of whether or not something should be licensed. Once that decision is made, how do you get to the members of the public to allay that concern?
Traditionally, in other jurisdictions that we've worked, commission annual reports, which contain specific sections on this, the impact of crime, and the resources that are devoted by both the industry and the regulatory agencies and the law enforcement agencies to combat this. Those annual reports can be very very helpful, and they're very well distributed. But again, it's changing public perception is always difficult. But in this particular area, some jurisdictions have been pretty successful, and at least ramping down the concerns to where it's a much more realistic level. We're talking about a brand new jurisdiction that's being born now, that has already been, I think, treated with a very effective starting statute. And all of these steps, I mean, these very public meetings, I think, are effective. It shows the Commission's commitment to educate the public. And all we can do is just give the benefit of our experience. The public will make the final decision.
Maybe what you could do is get your UCR statistics currently and now track them as you go forward when the casino's actually located in an area, and then you can really identify the subsequent increase or decrease of your UCR statistics from that point.
In New Jersey, we just create a reality show. We could call agent, this regulatory agency, and God knows what'll come out.
Thank God there was no film of that.
Yeah. But if there are statistics, they're germane to where the statistics occurred, where they were gathered from. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't think there's a study that encompasses, like, if you're going to open a casino, this is going to happen. No, this is how it happened in Mississippi. This is how it happened in New Jersey. This is how it happened in, whatever state, Connecticut. But also, the focus is casinos, casinos, casinos. It's not just casinos. We have more problems, truthfully, more problems in the hotel than we have in the casinos, because people come down with their family, or they come down with their wife, or they leave the wife at home and they bring someone else. I mean that in the nicest way. But I mean, And that's what happens, and so you know, it's a small city, and it's gonna bring those kind of problems, so you have things that we haven't discussed here. You have domestic issues, you have family fights, you have disputes with other people that don't happen in a casino, that have nothing to do with a casino. It just happens to be in a proximity to a casino. And there's such a significant amount of rooms and a significant amount of people that it seems to get that attention. And I know if you look at the paper or you look at the media in Atlantic City, well, it happened in a casino. Actually, most of them don't. Most of them don't. In the casino, it's the environment, it's entertainment, and people are engaged and are doing what they do, and then they typically leave. And it's the hotel or the other ancillary businesses and the restaurants and things like that. And that could happen anywhere, and I'm sure in this town, it happens in bars, and it happens in restaurants, and it happens in hotels already. But you're gonna bring in an environment where there's gonna be a complex, and you're gonna have everything in one spot. And I think that's really what the primer is, that's what the issue is. And also, because there's a heightened level of enforcement, there's probably better reporting, better detection and better reporting, and better documentation, which may lead to that heightened perception that there is an issue.
It sounds like there is certainly the casino immediate area because of all the security enhancements that take place. From your experience, kind of building off of that in the perimeter, and there is a need to have this kind of joint cooperation with all the different levels of law enforcement, but have you seen individual jurisdictions where the local officials, both public safety officials or the elected officials, kind of stepped it up and kind of were proactive in trying to prevent any unintended consequences from kind of flowing off property, so to speak?
Actually, I saw a positive commitment with Philadelphia in their casinos, and then Pittsburgh in their casinos. Atlantic City, I can't say there was a whole heck of a lot of effort from the local municipality in the early days.
But that has changed, and that's really changed because of that concept of the casino district, okay? And really, it's the infusion of places like the Walk, which is the outlet complex, which is very successful. And, you know, it's a more conducive environment to visitors, to families, and that's the idea now, is to control that and manage that a little bit better. The emphasis is on clean and safe. So there is a very, very ongoing, significant, positive attempt to do that. But initially with Atlantic City, they were islands, and they were islands. And then when you stepped out of the island, and that's why the development didn't follow maybe as quickly as it should, or maybe as successfully as it should. But that's not the case current day, and it's changed dramatically, and it's still in the process of change.
I would just add that the funding is very, very relevant to that determination too. The sharing that would be done with a host community, and probably to a lesser extent to a surrounding community, is going to come into play here. Some of those resources that may be developed through revenues generated by the casino really should and must be earmarked to public safety issues. Each municipality is going to have its own methodology in terms of making those determinations, but to ensure the effectiveness of the perimeter areas, once you get beyond the most protected zone, so to speak, definitely is going to require resources, and it's going to require revenues. And to what degree is probably going to be left up to each town. They're going to have to prioritize their own, but I can say there has to be some set aside for law enforcement, whether it's the police department, whether it's the county sheriff. Did I do it right?
I have no objection to that
Okay.
whatsoever. Regardless of where the casino is sited, I have no objection.
But in all seriousness, it may come down to what is available, but I think that is a necessary component to future distributions. And I know law enforcement is always short-funded, but I think it's an area that absolutely will have to be addressed and funded at the right time with whatever the local host communities and surrounding communities can afford. Okay.
Any Twitter questions?
Any questions?
Hey, first of all, thank you guys very much for helping educate Massachusetts. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
You spoken a lot about the organized crime concept, and I think that a lot of people have the fear that casinos are here to make money and that they're going to create a little bit of poverty around themselves and increase poverty-related crimes. A lot of people kind of want to know what your insights are on that concept and that fear, which may or may not be true.
First of all, my experience with casinos is they create jobs. And that's the truth. They create a lot of jobs, they employ a lot of people, they train a lot of people. And we just had the experience with the Rebel in Atlantic City, and there was an emphasis on the local community and trying to bring in the local community and give them opportunities. And, you know, I mean, to me, that's something, and I don't work for a casino, but to me, that's something I think is applaudable because they're trying to do something for the community, to involve the community, want to be part of the success. That's important. And also, I know earlier there was a question that somebody mentioned about casinos and the flavor of the neighborhood and the community. And what I noticed in Atlantic City, and especially lately, I thought it was pretty positive. There's some pretty significant restaurants in Atlantic City, and anybody who's been to Atlantic City probably has eaten at the White House Sub Shop, which is a hole in the wall from the 1940s, and but you know, it's a treat to go there. Well, that's an Atlantic City experience. The Taj Mahal brought in the White House Sub Shop and opened an outlet in the Taj Mahal because they want people to have that Atlantic City kind of experience. They want to make sure they get that, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning when the White House is closed. And that's happened in several of the local community restaurants where they opened up in a variety of casinos. They have food outlets, which I thought was pretty interesting. And that, to me, nobody ever said that was their marketing strategy, but to me, I just looked at that as they're trying to actually bring the community inside and be part of the community. So their businesses are still thriving on the outside, but now they have a business on the inside too. Their name, their identity, their brand, the neighborhood, you know, it's partnering with the casino.
I'd like to add, I think that's an excellent question. We've had a somewhat unique experience, my firm and I, and my partner in particular, where we've represented setting up gaming commissions and so forth for Indian tribes. And one of the more interesting things is what is the effect of a casino on a community that previously, in many cases, you know, was not overly employed, you know, had some degree of economic distress. Our experience has been that not only has the surrounding area been benefited by jobs, by just an overall increase in things positive within a jurisdiction, but clearly it has an effect on crime because the people that, in our experience, that are employed there and brought families there were interested in keeping their communities and their neighborhoods clean. And it made a big difference, but very positive. And these are really very good microcosms because you're talking about something that an industry has dropped in, and in a matter of a couple of years, that industry is probably the first or second largest employer in a rural area. And literally overnight, the effect of that, the ripple effect, forget about the economics, just on a neighborhood and the quality of life for everybody has been significant. So I would say, no, it does not increase the poverty-type crime, but would work against it. Okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you for coming down. Thank you so much.